Alright guys, don't know what's up with the tip top dancing. I don't know what's up with the TikTok dancing, but right now it's just a lot of fun, so I'm gonna keep doing it. So today I am back with you with another video, and today we are shifting in our camera basics from aperture to shutter speed. But before we get started, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment down below and let me know what other videos you guys are interested in seeing. We're wrapping up the camera basics exposure series. I can move on to some other basic things, or I can move on to some more advanced things. Let me know in the comments below. Now, what is shutter speed? Shutter speed is the opening and closing of your shutter for a period of time which lets in light to your camera. Now, shutter speed can get very math heavy very quickly if you allow it. So if you look at the fractions of shutter speed in terms of a full second would be 1/1. So let's say 1/1, so a full second of a shutter being opened and closed sounds like this. Open, closed. Pretty easy to grasp. Now think about that in terms of shutter speed quickness. So 1/4 of a second might sound like 1/100th of a second might sound like, and 1/1000th of a second might sound like. So that's the easiest way for me to think about it in those kind of terms. Instead of worrying about math so much, think about it in terms of how long your shutter is going to be open and what that sounds like musically. Most of my students, I think, unless you think about things really mathematically, and I do actually, so it's kind of funny, but I think thinking about it musically or by beat makes more sense. So now that we've heard what shutter speed sounds like at different speeds, let's talk about what those numbers mean. So if you're thinking about your shutter opening and closing very quickly, that would mean that less light is getting in. And what that means is you have the ability to freeze motion. So 1/1000 or higher is something we use a lot in sports photography. So on the other hand of that, you have 1 full second. 1 full second is not as slow as your shutter can go, but it is extremely slow. And what you would see with this shutter speed is a lot of motion. So you would need something like a tripod. Shifting from that, let's talk about what you can hand hold your camera at. Most people, just in general, can't hand hold their camera and get the sharp images you're looking for below 1/60th of a second. For me personally, I feel like I can't go less than 1/25th of a second. And the reason for that being is my hands just aren't as steady as I wish they were. So, I don't know. Maybe I drank caffeine for too long. But, as a general rule of thumb, when you think about how fast your shutter speed can go, how it's determined whether or not you can handhold is usually based off of the focal length. Here I have the nifty 50, and I have another video about that if you want to check it out. The general rule is whatever your focal length is, so this is 50 millimeter, you can handhold at whatever that focal length is or faster. So for this, it would be a 50th of a second or faster. So 1/50th, 1/125th, 1/250th, 1/500th, a 1/4 of a second. You should utilize a tripod if you want to get the sharp image that you desire. So before I close this, let's talk about what kind of shutter speeds you would use in certain situations. So if you're into wildlife photography and you like to shoot things like birds, 2500th of a second is probably a good starting point or faster for you. We've already talked about sports, but I'll reiterate what I use is 12/50th of a second or faster for sports. Now, some people will use 1,000th of a second or higher. So with portraits, I tend to stick around 2/50th of a second, and the reason for that being is a lot of times with portraits, as we learned last week, I'm shooting with a wider aperture, which is going to allow a shallower depth of field. And with that, what complements that best is a faster shutter speed. So 2/50th of a second for portraits is where I tend to stick. Also, just a quick note about shutter speed. When you are working with strobes and bringing in other lighting, 2/50th or slower is where you need to be. This also works the same way when shooting video. 2/50th of a second or slower so that you don't get things like banding. We won't get into that in depth here, but it was just something I wanted to note. Now with landscapes, you tend to use a lower shutter speed as well. Usually I'm around 100th of a second, 1/25th of a second, and the reason for that being is with landscapes, I want everything to be in focus and sharp. So I use a larger aperture number, which allows me a greater depth of field. So not a shallow depth of field at all, a greater depth of field. If you're into travel photography and you're looking at what shutter speed works best for like waterfalls or stargazing or something like that, you definitely are going to be over a second at this point. Probably even 5 seconds and higher. And you definitely, as we've already discussed, will need a tripod in situations like this. There's no way that I know of to hand hold at a second, 5 seconds or longer without a tripod and get the sharp image that you're looking for. Alright guys, thank you for being here. That's all I have for you today. I hope you guys are being safe, being healthy, you're happy. You got to have a wonderful Mother's Day yesterday. I know this channel isn't about this, but as someone who has struggled with infertility in the past, I just want you all to know that I'm thinking of you. Those of you who don't have children, who want children, who have had difficulty getting pregnant or anything else, I am with you. I see you. I'm praying for you. I'm thinking of you. Alright. We'll see you guys on the next video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Stay safe. There's a fire truck and it's making a lot of noise and I'm getting really tired of it.